layer styles are not really effects as such, but behave in some similar ways. They're actually attached to your layer in a different category than effects are. And I'll show you what that means once we start working on this project. So in this video, you'll find out the similarities and differences between layer styles and effects. One of the things that makes layer styles unique is the fact that you can import them from Photoshop. So you can set up layer styles in Photoshop and import them into After Effects. So if you want to follow along, open the Effects AEP and open up 06 Layer Styles Comp. And in here, we have a Photoshop file that's been brought in from Photoshop, obviously. If we select all of those layers and double hit the U key or go to Animation, Reveal Modified Properties, it will show us what's been modified from the default settings. Now, if I'm to extend the timeline by hitting the tilde key when I'm hovering over it, you'll see that some of the things that have changed from the default settings are layer styles. Now, I haven't actually applied those in After Effects. I've actually applied them in Photoshop, and it counts them as having changed from the default settings. So that's a handy little shortcut to expose your layer styles. Now, obviously, it's quite tricky to work on a timeline that's this deep, so we're just going to close that up again. So close all of the layers and then hit the tilde key again just to bring the timeline back down to the bottom. And what we'll do is we'll have a look at these one by one. So if I open a layer, it has my transform property group, then it has layer styles, and if I was to apply an effect, for example, hue saturation, then it would apply the effect before the transformations. Layer styles are applied after the transformations, and the effect that things are applied in the timeline is important, as we'll see in other tutorials. So that's one of the differences. Layer styles are after transformations, effects are before transformations. Okay, the other thing is if we apply a hue saturation, it will be applied to the layer, but it probably won't be applied to the layer style. So for example, here I have a drop shadow, and let's make the drop shadow a different color. Let's make it red so it stands out a little bit more, and let's increase the opacity. And you can see here this drop shadow that's come from Photoshop is quite clear now. Let's affect the distance as well. Now, I've applied a hue saturation effect to this. If I adjust the hue, notice that it's applying the hue change to the text in my logo, but it's not affecting my layer style. Now, if I had a drop shadow applied to this layer and it was before hue saturation, it would be affected by that. So the order in which things appear is important in After Effects, and it's important to recognize that. Now, you'll also notice that I'm able to change all of these properties. Even though this was created in Photoshop, I'm able to come in here, make changes to the properties, and of course, anything that you see me change here can be animated in After Effects. So all the layer styles that you set up in Photoshop can be animated in After Effects. Not only that, I can add other layer styles. So I could select my layer, go to Layer, Layer Styles, and we could add something like a bevel and emboss, just to add a bevel to the edge of my logo. Now, bevel and emboss, in my opinion, is usually a little bit OTT, standing for over the top. So I'm going to bring the size down a little bit, so maybe to about a value of 3, and that just gives us a nice little edge. And also, I usually tend to adjust the lighting. So if we go down here, we have highlight and shadow controls. So I usually bring that down to about 50 for the highlight and about the same for the shadow. So all of these can be adjusted. All of the properties for the layer styles can be adjusted and even animated in After Effects. So let's have a look at how we would animate one of those. So let's apply a completely new layer style to this layer here, which is a text layer. We'll go to Layer, Layer Styles, and in here you can see what's available: drop shadow, inner shadow, outer glow, inner glow, bevel and emboss, satin, color overlay, gradient overlay, and stroke. So for example, let's have a look at how a stroke would look on our text. We're not very keen on that, so let's undo that. And let's go back into Layer Styles, and this time we'll choose an outer glow. Now it places a light glow around my text, but I can go in here and adjust the settings. So I could maybe choose a blue color, get a nice strong blue color. Now you'll notice that it's not having much of an effect, and that's because we're using screen mode, and because I've chosen a darker color, we don't really see much of a result of it. If I choose something like overlay, you'll see a much stronger effect from my blue colour. So depending on the blending mode you choose, you'll get different results. So the blending modes are actually attached to the glow effect. So let's stick with hard light because it's actually very easy to see what's going on with hard light. We can also always adjust it later if need be. So we're going to adjust the spread value, and that's just going to spread it out a little bit. Also adjust the size, and we'll bring the opacity down. And these are all the same controls that you would have in Photoshop for your layer styles. And I'm just going to change that slightly more turquoise, so get a more turquoise look to it. And you'll see that it's starting to look really nice. So let's spread it out a little bit more and adjust the size a little bit further down. So it kind of looks like a stroke, but slightly softer than a stroke. Now, if I was to choose something like overlay, you'll notice that it only appears to be affecting these letters and these letters. And that's because these blending modes behave differently depending on the background colours. So somewhere we've got a light background colour, overlay will work less effectively than where we have a darker background colour. So that's something else you need to consider when using these blending modes. So let's choose hard light again. So what we want to do now is we want to animate that. Now we could animate that by hand. So let's do that to start with. And it works the same as effects or transformations. Let's just select, for example, the opacity setting. We'll set a keyframe. We'll move ahead a little bit, and we'll set another opacity keyframe at 0. Okay, so we have 2 keyframes. Now, in order to loop that, there are lots of different ways of looping in After Effects, and later we'll have a look at expressions that can help you with looping. But for now, what we're going to do is just copy and paste, and you can copy and paste keyframes to create loops. So we can just copy those, Command-C or Control-C on PC, and then paste it in. Move ahead again, paste it in. Once we have a few, we can select them, copy them, paste them in. Select that whole group, copy them, paste them in. So there are quicker ways of creating loops, but that's pretty quick and easy to do. And now you see we have the layer style animating on and off. And of course we could select those keyframes if we want to. Go to Animation, Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease. And now we have a flickering outline for our text. So layer styles can be applied and animated just like effects. Difference being that they can also be imported from Photoshop, and they're also applied in a different order from effects. One more important difference between them and effects is that you can actually have global light angles for all layer styles, so that you change the light angle for, say, the drop shadow, and the bevel and emboss will update simultaneously. There's also advanced blending options in here in the blending options, where you can determine how the layer styles blend with your layers. If you want to find out more about these options, you can look in the online help.